So I know annual franchises are pretty looked down upon these days, especially things like FIFA and Call of Duty. And I understand why, don't get me wrong, I understand like all the microtransactions and the fact that it's annual is also a problem because, you feel like they should put more polish into it. But for me, I actually quite like annual franchises and think they do have their place. I don't think they should be everything. Like, I think Call of Duty and FIFA are good annual franchises for various reasons. And with things like FIFA especially, I feel like you can't really do non-annual FIFA games, and I'll get into that later. But I like it, and there is an annual franchise that kind of took a break a while back, but is back to being annual. That might have been better not being annual, but it's okay annual. Assassin's Creed is alright as an annual franchise, but it could be better without it. But there hasn't been any announcements so far actually, so it might not be annual this year. I don't know. We'll see how it goes there. But I have a lot of opinions on them, right? Like, they're very comfortable games, right? You can always come back to them all the time. Like, if you ever get bored of them, it's always very easy to come back to them because they have the same style of play all the time. You know what I mean? Like, if you go to play FIFA 12 and then you didn't play until FIFA 20, like, it's practically the same game. There's a few differences, but it's practically the same game. So you're not really missing out too much and you kind of fit back in, right? So it's very comfortable. Also means it can build nostalgia based on gameplay alone, right? Because you can like jump back in from 2008 to 2020 and you can be like, oh man, I remember how this played. I remember I used to play this with my buds or something. Has a lot of nostalgic value, yeah. And that is something to, in terms of a game, you can't really say that's good because obviously nostalgic value doesn't really make a good game. But the comfort value that it offers is very good, I believe, because you need that type of game where you can just jump in, play a few matches and leave it at that, and it's constant, right? The way it's annual kind of forces it to refresh the season every year, so people start playing again. Like, if people only play for a couple of months or maybe half the runtime of the year, if the game only came out 3 years or every 2 years, that would stop there. You wouldn't get as much of a big increase, right? But when you see people who want to play FIFA every year, it does get a refresh every single year, so that keeps the online base alive, even if it's a very, I guess, simplistic game. I don't know how, it's not really simplistic. There's a lot of things to it for professional and stuff, but like, it's the type of game where people do get bored and people drop off. And you also don't have to play every year. Like, people always give out about annual franchises saying, oh, every year, like, I have to buy it every year. You don't really. It's the type of game where it's like, you play it till you get bored and then you can drop off for as long as you want. Like, I played Black Ops 3, but I did not pick up a game until Modern Warfare, because I wasn't interested in Infinity War, or what was the other one called? Sorry, not Modern Warfare, actually, Black Ops 4. Sorry, is when I picked it up after that. I don't pick up all the games, right? I didn't pick up Odyssey for Assassin's Creed. I didn't pick up FIFA 19. Well, I mean, my brother did, but I didn't pick it up. There's certain things where my opinion on these games is they're really comfortable types of games to play, right? Because you can always just jump back in whenever you feel like it. And the games don't change too much, so it's not too jarring, right? Don't get me wrong, though. I mean, I know I'm trying to sing the praise a little bit and say how good it is, because it is good. I think the sole thing about annual games you got to realize is they are comfort games, right? They're very comfortable to play. They're very easy to play. They come out every year, so you don't have to play them every year. You can just pick up the ones you like, and the mechanics never change, so they get very easy to get back into, very easy, and they're comfortable and nostalgic. And I think that there's something there in the industry, right? You kind of need them. And for things like FIFA, as I was saying earlier, the problem with FIFA would be it's not a supernatural thing, right? So you can't change the mechanics of football. You know what I mean? You have to keep the mechanics the same. And the only thing about football that changes every year is the league and the teams and the players. And I know you could say they could just do a roster update, but the problem with that is it's a lot harder to do certain changes in a patch or whatever if you need to change the game even slightly. Or, for example, new music. I mean, obviously that's easy to put in, but it's also a new game kind of brings more eyes to the product, right? And for music licensors and stuff who want to give their game or give their music to those games, that's more appealing than, oh, I'm going to add you in the patch every year. You know what I mean? At the same time, as I said earlier, it refreshes the online sphere. And the same thing happens with Call of Duty, but to a lesser extent, because Call of Duty has gotten to the point now where I can see why people don't play it, right? I love the gameplay of Call of Duty, but they're constantly going between World War II and futuristic warfare and modern warfare, right? And I get they kind of have to. There's nothing they can really do. But unlike, it's hard because you feel like if they're going back to World, because there's rumors about them going back to World War II, and it's hard to say if they'll do it well again. You know what I mean? Whereas with FIFA, you know, their teams and players change every year. Their value changes. Their stats change based on their performance the year that was in it. So things do change, and they change the mechanics slightly and add different game modes, and it does get quite good. And they tried Journey, they tried a story mode. It didn't really work out very well, to be honest. But they do change stuff, but not very drastically, so people can still jump in if they haven't played it for 5 years or if they haven't played it for a year. So also, you have to realize football doesn't change. The actual mechanics of the sport don't change. So you have to kind of keep it very similar to be able to have it more realistic, because people jump into FIFA because it's a realistic game. They want a realistic depiction of football and be able to play as their teams and have matches as the teams they want to play as. So if they were to go the supernatural route, that wouldn't sit well with a lot of people. You know what I mean? That's what FIFA does. So they need to keep it realistic. And if you were and all the different things I said there, right? And because of all of those things, mainly because of the whole refreshing everything, because you kind of need to do that with the way football works. The annual way FIFA is done is very handy for its particular sport, and it's very good for FIFA, and I think it works well for FIFA. There are a lot of problems with FIFA, and I will get into that now, but a lot of the problems with FIFA are genuinely because of its age rating. I'll get into that real quick. But the whole problem with microtransactions is a big thing, but we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that in a bit. Now, don't get me wrong, there are problems with FIFA. Like, I'm not saying it's a perfect game. There are problems with it because you're supposed to have polish, right? When you have an annual game that's the same nearly every time, it should be super polished. There shouldn't be many bugs, if any at all. It should be polished to a T. The gameplay should be polished. Everything should be polished, and FIFA does that pretty well, I believe. I think the netcode's a bit dodgy, but that's it for every game. They need to sort that out. Same with Call of Duty has a tiny bit of spotty netcode, but it's not too bad. There are major problems with these games though, and major problems that we need to talk about, particularly FIFA, because with Call of Duty you can kind of say, oh well, it's 18s, right? So they shouldn't be giving it to kids or whatever, but people with gambling problems are still a problem, and that's microtransactions, right? Because if you think about it, microtransactions is a form of gambling, and people have said this for so long, and it is true. Now, I myself haven't personally participated in microtransactions since the first Overwatch anniversary. I haven't bought anything with microtransactions, which I know is like, oh, why'd you do the Overwatch thing? But like, I don't know, man, that was my first time buying stuff with microtransactions, and I haven't done it since. I just think it's a waste of money. I could buy manga volumes or an actual game with that money instead of buying, or DLC even, instead of buying a microtransaction. But that's not the point, sorry, to get off track a little bit. The idea here is with particularly FIFA, these are kids. This game is rated, I think, 3, maybe 7. I'm pretty sure it's rated 3 in Europe, right? So 3-year-olds are legally allowed to play this game. And microtransactions are in the Ultimate Team, one of the most attractive game modes in the series, or in the franchise. You know what I mean? Because you're allowed to pick your players. You're allowed to go, alright, let's play online with Rashford, Kane and Lloris, for example, on your team. Or you can have Messi and Ronaldo on the same team. It's really cool. You can have all the different types of players, and it's cool for people like me who are into football, people who are into that sort of thing, right? But the problem is, because it's rated so low, and those type of mechanics are in it, it's a problem for kids, because kids can just put in their parents' credit card account and just start spending. And there's no way to disable microtransactions. Like, it's not like a prompt in the settings where parents can put parental controls on it or anything like that. You can't disable it in-game, which I think is one of the biggest problems with these type of games, right? With Call of Duty, you can make a defense, right? Because you can say, well, it's 18s plus, so it has the age rating to do that type of stuff. I still think you need to have an ability to disable it, right? Because you need to think of the safety of people. Because in casinos and stuff, you can turn that off, or not turn that off, but you can get the casino to not let you in, so you can't gamble. So if you're like, you should have a way to disable it. And obviously they might say, oh well, you know, we're rated 18, but kids do play their games, and they don't necessarily have to acknowledge it, because acknowledging it legally could get them into trouble. But like, what I mean is, what they have to do is they have to allow you to be able to disable microtransactions, whether your kid is picking up the controller, whether it's in Call of Duty or FIFA, or if your kid is not your kid, or if you are a problem gambler or have problems with addiction to gambling and waste your money. And even if they don't allow you to disable it, let's say for example in Call of Duty, I think they need to guarantee allow you to disable it in FIFA because it's rated 3s. They need to be able to allow you to set a cap on how much you can spend, because people spend so much money on microtransactions that people have lost homes before. Now, granted, these are YouTubers that have probably made up a lot of that just so they can get views, but it has happened to other ordinary people as well. But the most documented one is a particular YouTuber, I can't remember his name, but that's besides the point. Now, I do have other problems with microtransactions, and this is the biggest problem with annualized games, as I said. Story games like Assassin's Creed, man, there should not be a single thing of microtransactions in that game. You have no justification for it. With FIFA, alright, I know I said FIFA's bad because it has microtransactions, and it is, but in terms of like mechanically, like in terms of, not mechanically, but like sports cards and match attacks cards have been a thing in football for so long that it does kind of make sense, you know what I mean? I don't agree with it because you have to pay real money for it and kids play these games and you have no way to disable it. But it does make kind of in-world sense if you get what I mean, right? Whereas, and with Call of Duty, it's like supply packs and stuff, so that makes sense as well. But in story games, and also it's a heavily multiplayer game as well, which does cover their asses because there's a lot of multiplayer involved. But with story games like fucking Call of Duty, or not Call of Duty, fucking Assassin's Creed, like it's just fucking ridiculous, man. I should be able to get them in-game by playing the game. Or if you really want to put buying in it, like, it's just ridiculous. No, I should be able to get it by playing the game. It's ridiculous. If you want to put microtransactions in your game, make a free-to-play game. That's the only reason some of them are acceptable. Right? Because they're free to play. That's the only time I really accept microtransactions in general. But if your game is rated 18s, technically it should be okay because it's rated 18s, which is the appropriate rating for people who should be allowed to use microtransactions if they legally want to. I know this went on a tangent about microtransactions for the last few minutes, but annual games aside from that, are very good. FIFA is great fun. I love playing FIFA with friends and even in general. That was the first game I played with my dad. My dad was a big FIFA guy. I used to play Spurs and he used to play Leeds, and me and my brother and him used to have tournaments together. It was great fun. And we do it every couple of years around Christmas time when we get the new FIFA. Sometimes we don't get it and you don't do it that year, but whenever you do get the new FIFA, you know, it's cool. You get to play tournaments with your family. It's great. It's the type of game everyone can enjoy as long as they're a sports fan, because sports is so widely spread. It's great fun. And stuff about these games is like annual games. There's not a problem with annual games in the sense of in concept, as long as it's done in a particular type of game where it's well suited, and also it's done with good polish, because you need polish. If you're going to have an annual game that's similar enough and you don't have polish, that's going to be a big problem. With things like things like Assassin's Creed, again, just wanted to point that out. The polish in those games is horrendous. The amount of bugs they have when they come out is horrible. That's why it being annual is a horrible idea as well. Like, I wouldn't have too much of a problem with it, but the problem with them is, you know, there are fucking bugs everywhere with I keep going to Call of Duty immediately. It's just easier to say with Assassin's Creed, because it is it's a buggy mess on release all the time. I don't even get it on release. I wait a couple months because of how buggy it is. And that is a problem with annualized games. And I know I've been talking a lot about problems they have, but because in these type of discussions you need to talk about the good and the bad. And I think the good does outweigh the bad in general, at least in terms of most of these games. Microtransactions is a big problem, and you could say that outweighs every positive in these games. I disagree, because most people who play video games are consenting adults, so it's not too much of a problem. But for that big percentage of kids who play things like FIFA and Call of Duty, it's a major problem, because we need to get it sorted somehow, to even just put in a disabled button or a maximum payment button, you know, something that can just have a bit of parental control so kids don't get addicted to it or kids don't spend all the money. It's a simple thing they can add in to change it, so I don't think it's that big of an ask. Obviously Call of Duty have to come up with a corporate reason, because they can't say kids play their games, because that would get them into legal trouble because their games are rated 18s. I'm pretty sure, right? It would. I think. I'm not 100% on that now that I'm thinking about it, but that's besides the point. On a final note with this, annual games have their place in the gaming community. A lot of them are really cool, and there's just a few problems they have to sort out, and they have to make sure they have good polish. Now, I'm not going to say every game should do it, because obviously not, but annual games have their place in the community, and things like FIFA and Call of Duty are something that I'm glad are annual games, because they're very comfortable to play and very nostalgic for me especially, and you can just jump back in whenever you want, year after year, or maybe you can take a few breaks, and it's really cool. And I do appreciate the people who work on these games. I know EA is a bit scummy, but the workers themselves, you know, hats off to you. You make some killer games.